morning and welcome to the Mad City Vegan Fest. Thank you for coming to our first talk. I'm Lynn Pauley. I'm co-director of Alliance for Animals, and I'm here to introduce our first speaker, Julie Sinistore, who's made quite an impression on our Vegan Fest organizers. Julie began her studies with a Bachelor of Science degree in Natural Resource Management. She continued to receive her Master of Science in Agroecology, and as if that wasn't enough, she went on to earn her Ph.D. in Biological Systems Engineering. She's currently the Senior Life Cycle Analyst at Virant here in Madison. She's here to talk about a methodology called Life Cycle Assessment, or LCA. And during a recent visit with Hannah West, our organizer, she talked about her ethical concerns of honey, agave, beet, and cane sugar, and Hannah said that she could never look at sweeteners the same again. So, without any more ado, I'd like to welcome Julie Sinistore, and welcome.
Thanks. Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts of food choices. Just a quick roadmap of where we're going. I'll give you a little bit more on my background of who the heck am I and why should you listen to anything that I say. And then I'm going to tell you some stuff that people in the audience who are vegan are going to be like, yay, my food choices are great for the environment. And then I'm going to tell you some stuff about the environmental impacts of food choices that you're going to be like, oh my God, no! If you care about the environment, which a lot of people in Madison do usually care about the environment. Then finally, I'm going to sum it all up with some reflection. I really hope we can have a little discussion, and after the talk, I'll be in the other area where the book table is, and you can come and accost me all you want and be like, but I thought agave was perfect. And I'm going to be like, look, I'm really sorry. So, who am I and why listen to me? Okay. I am a staunch environmentalist. I do not hide this whatsoever. This is a picture of me when I was living in the Adirondack Mountains with no electricity, very little running water, no showers, no phones, no internet, and I was just like a total tree-hugging hippie. My nickname in college was Julia Butterfly. If that makes sense to you, awesome. If it doesn't, Google it. I seriously wanted to go live in redwood trees so that people wouldn't cut them down and everything. And that is where my whole not wanting to eat meat or participate in animal agriculture came from, because I studied agriculture a lot. I studied it in college. The full title of my undergraduate degree is actually Natural Resource Management with a concentration in conservation and ecology, and a minor in environmental policies, institutions, and behaviors. And everything I studied was like conventional agriculture, organic agriculture. It's all of agriculture's effects on the environment, which is part of the reason why I went vegan. And also in part because I love animals. I ran my own CSA for a year in New York, where I inherited a flock of chickens, where it was literally like, either you take care of these chickens or we're just gonna kill them all. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll take care of these chickens and deal with their eggs, even though I'm a vegan. But this was my favorite rooster. He was my friend. His name's Rocket, and he broke his toe. And the vet said that the standard practice when a chicken breaks its toe is just to kill it, because it's just a chicken, right? No, I splinted it with wood and whatever. So I care about animal rights. I care about animals, but from my heart of hearts, my whole veganism, which I've been vegan almost 13 years now, comes from the environmental standpoint. So, needless to say, I know a lot about agriculture, I know a lot about food, nutrition. Somebody gave me a really big compliment last night and said that I was the reason they were vegan, and that I taught them a whole bunch of stuff about nutrition and how to eat right as a vegan and all kinds of things. I cook like crazy. This picture, actually, this dish was featured on the Earth Balance website as one of their, use our products. Here's one of our, people who uses our products submitted a recipe. So anyway, I'm just trying to tell you, I know a lot about agriculture. I've been vegan for a really long time, and I really care about environmental issues. And I put that into my everyday life. So my whole academic and professional career has been centered on environmental protection. I do something called life cycle assessment, okay? Life cycle assessment is a methodology to sum up all of the environmental benefits and burdens of the production, use, and disposal of goods and services. I know that's a mouthful, but basically I look at the making of a product, and I started with Wisconsin corn grain ethanol. And I start all the way at the beginning of when it's starting to be made, sum up everything: water, greenhouse gas emissions, energy use, and where do things come from, and how were they made, and then through the production of the product, through the end of life of the product with ethanol is burning. So that was my master's degree. Then I moved on to my Ph.D. where I did the life cycle assessment of cellulosic ethanol, so making it from things that are not corn grain, like switchgrass and corn stover. And I did that through the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, which is a center on UW campus. I went to UW Madison for my master's and my PhD. And the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center is funded by the Department of Energy. So who knows who this guy is? Stephen Chu, thank you. And who's Stephen Chu?
The old Director of Energy?
Yeah, he's the former Secretary of Energy. In this picture, he was still the Secretary of Energy. This guy's like my idol. He's a Nobel winner in physics. He's a frickin' genius. He actually knows something about science, which was something that I really was very happy that the head of the Department of Energy was somebody who actually knew something about scientists, not just some frickin' politician. So anyway, I rose to the level in my career where they had to pick 6 grad students to meet with him to represent the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, and they picked me. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I'm trying to tell you, I know what I'm talking about. So if I say something that makes you upset and you're like, I don't believe you, please believe me. Anyway, and I was just really proud because this picture was taken the day before I defended my PhD, and Stephen Chu wished me luck and then said, but I have a feeling you don't need it. So that was just like, whoa. So anyway, got my PhD, was immediately hired by Virent. Virent is a bio-based fuels and chemicals company. We make bio-based gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, chemically identical to gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, and plastics out of plants. And so an example of that is this, I don't know if you've seen the Dasani water bottle. Right now it's 30% bio-based plastic. We are going to take this to 100% bio-based plastic, and I'm going to do the life cycle assessment to make sure that it's better than petroleum plastic. So that's what I do for a living. And you should generally listen to me because I just kick ass. So now that I've puffed myself up, okay. First, the good news about the environmental impacts of food choices. Really great on greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, honestly, the low-hanging fruit, if you want to reduce your personal greenhouse gas emission footprint in the United States, go vegan. You know, you hear all kinds of things all the time about, oh, if you just ate, Meatless Monday, you'd reduce your footprint by this much. If you just cut out meat, red meat, you'd reduce your footprint by this much. If you went vegan compared to the average American non-vegan, you would reduce your greenhouse gas emission footprint by almost 50%. So from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint, super awesome, really, really good. And why is that? It's in part because not even so much the animal agriculture. You hear a lot about, oh, cow farts are full of methane, and methane is 25 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2, blah, blah, blah. But it's really actually about grain agriculture, and that's something I've studied a lot, studying corn grain ethanol. There's a lot of emissions involved with nitrogen fertilizers. There's a lot of emissions involved with just tilling the soil and running machinery and harvesting grain. So the more sort of grain-based food, which is meat and dairy and eggs, you can cut out of your diet, the more greenhouse gas emissions you can reduce. Now, of course, some people don't care about that. Some people are like, global warming, ha ha ha, that's just a freaking hoax made up by hippies. I don't believe that, and if you'd like to debate me on that one, please feel free. That's a fun one for me. Big yay in the check for the good column for the environmental impact of the food choice of being vegan on greenhouse gas emissions is to drastically reduce them. Maybe many of you already knew that, I don't know. Water use. It's been shown in many studies, and a lot of the studies behind these kinds of infographics are life cycle assessments. It baffles me how little that gets mentioned, how little I hear the words life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis or LCA when news media talk about these kinds of studies. They don't even say the words. Maybe they're afraid Americans' eyes will glaze over and no one will listen to them anymore. But in order to figure out, for example, how many gallons of water it takes, or liters of water it takes to produce a kilogram of beef, you have to do a full assessment, all the way from the production of the grain, through feeding it to the animal, through processing the meat, through delivering it to the grocery store, and some assessments even take it all the way to the person's table. You know, how did they prepare it, how much of it got wasted, how much of it spoiled in the store and never even got sold. So from a water standpoint, plant-based foods use a lot less water to make the same mass of food. Of course, and you always have to be prepared for the counter argument, someone's going to say, well, what about the quality of food? You know, lettuce may have a very small water footprint, but I can't suffice on lettuce. It doesn't have protein in it. It doesn't have, you know, very many calories. It doesn't have a lot of other nutrients that I need, like iron and stuff like that. And yes, it has to be a balance. But overwhelmingly, and I remember this, reading this in Francis Moore Lepay's book, Diet for a Small Planet, that to raise one beef animal to slaughter weight takes as much water as required to float a US aircraft carrier. I remember reading that when I was 14. It may not still be true today because it was a very old copy of Diet for a Small Planet, but I just remember being completely shocked by that and thinking, how could we possibly sustain ourselves if we keep using up all this water just to make cows? I don't understand. So she planted that seed in my head. And then there are other issues, aside from greenhouse gases, aside from water use. So nitrogen emissions to water bodies. Do people know what eutrophication is? No? Okay. So when a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus gets into a water body like a lake, it can cause a bloom of algae. And you've probably seen this in Lake Mendota, and you've probably smelled it too. You know, it's big green, sometimes it's yellow, sometimes it's red, goopy sliminess. And the problem with that is that the algae eats up all the oxygen in the water and kills things. And this is what's referred to as the hypoxic zone or the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, because there's a lot of grain agriculture along the Mississippi watershed, and a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus leaches off of the fields after being applied to grow the grains and corn and soy and things like that, ends up in the river, flows its way down to the Gulf of Mexico, feeds all this algae, causes all these blooms, they eat up all the oxygen and literally kill everything that was trying to live there, that needs oxygen to live. So this is a huge, you know, environmental impact that doesn't get discussed anywhere near as much as greenhouse gases and climate change and stuff like that. But I think in some senses is actually much more important because it affects so many aspects like water quality and, you know, just like I said, if you live in Madison, you've seen what the lake looks like when it gets too much phosphorus, and it smells horrible and it's disgusting and you can't go swimming in it and things die and it's bad. So there's this really interesting footprint calculator that you can go to online to figure out your personal nitrogen emissions footprint, nitrogen into water bodies. And so I went there and I filled out my personal N footprint as a vegan who tries to have a small commute to work and live as efficiently as I possibly can, but I still live, you know, in the United States. And so compared to this column, which is the average person in the United States, this is me, my nitrogen footprint is a lot lower, right? And especially this red bar is my food consumption impacts on nitrogen emissions, and it's a lot lower. Great, awesome, wonderful. So choosing to be vegan drastically reduces my effects on things like the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. But then I picked another country. I picked Germany, and I compared myself and the average American to the average German. And being a vegan in the United States, just on food consumption, is only about as good as the average German, which I thought was kind of funny. The average German who eats whatever, not a vegan German, right? So just because I choose to be vegan in the United States, it's not like a panacea. It's not like suddenly everything I do and the way I conduct my life is somehow doesn't have an effect on the environment. And I'm not saying that vegans claim that, but I have been bludgeoned with that stick before. Let's just put it that way. So we have to think about our food choices beyond just, well, it's vegan, therefore it's good, which is a trap I see a lot of people fall into, or an assumption I think a lot of people make about the vegan dietary choices and lifestyle choices. So, that said, now I have some not so good news about the environmental impacts of food choices that you can make as a vegan that still harm the environment and actually inadvertently also harm animals. So I found another online calculator that just generally shows my overall environmental and ecological footprint, not just my greenhouse gas emission footprint. And again, even as a vegan, in part just because I live in the United States and we have the electricity grid that we have and we have the transportation system that we have, and there's nothing I could do about that, really, it would still take 3.7 Earths to sustain, if everyone in the world lived like me, it would still take 3.7 Earths to sustain us all. So that's not good, because we don't have 3.7 Earths, right? So that just tells me that I need to go beyond my food choices if I really want to live the most environmentally sensitive life that I possibly can. And I really try. I mean, I just moved totally to the other side of town from where I used to live so that I could cut down on my commute, which yes, saves me money, but also saves burning gasoline and things like that. So, how many people are familiar with the controversies around palm oil? Okay, good. You're a pretty educated audience. I figured you would be. So here's the conundrum. You look at a lot of vegan products and they contain palm oil, right? A lot of palm oil is grown in Indonesia, which is native habitat to orangutans. And in order to grow this palm oil, they cut down a lot of forests, bulldoze it, grow the palm oil. This fragments the habitats of orangutans. Orangutans lose their foraging grounds, their sheltering grounds, their mating grounds. Fragmentation makes it difficult for them to find mates, makes it difficult for them to reproduce. Often they're even hit by machinery, hit by falling trees, or intentionally killed because they get in the way of palm oil production. Now, that being said, there are certification schemes for sustainable palm oil or orangutan safe palm oil, and I have looked into many of these certifications, and if you want to talk more about that later, some of them are very good. There's like Roundtable on Sustainable Oils is a good certification, but in general, if this is something that concerns you, you might want to try to avoid palm oil. It's a big debate, and I could talk about it for a long time. But it's something that palm oil itself, as a product, is vegan, right? But the consequences of its production result in things that I would think that everyone in this room would consider not vegan, like driving orangutans to extinction. So that sucks. Sugar. So apparently I blew Hannah's mind when I told her this stuff about sugar. So I study sugar a lot because I studied Brazilian sugarcane ethanol production. A lot of other biofuel companies examine Brazilian sugarcane as sugar from sugarcane as a potential feedstock for making bio-based fuels and chemicals as well. And the way that most, 70% of sugarcane is harvested is to first burn the fields, right? And that's in part to remove the leaves of the sugarcane plant, which are very abrasive. I mean, if you walk through a sugarcane field and without long sleeves on, your arms would be torn up. And a lot of sugarcane in Brazil is still manually harvested. They literally go out there and chop it down. Some of it is mechanically harvested. That's true. But a lot of it is still manually harvested. In order to do that, they have to burn it. And this has a lot of negative environmental consequences. And I'm not talking about, oh, they're tearing down the rainforest. No, actually, the primary cause of tearing down the rainforest in Brazil is for soybeans to feed animals, which as a vegan, you're not participating in. But when the fields are burned and the way in which sugarcane is grown, it's detrimental to the soil. The burning itself kind of sterilizes the soil, which if you know anything about soil, destroys microbial communities, which makes the land less fertile, which over time makes it so that you can't even grow sugarcane there anymore, and you certainly can't reforest it because you've destroyed the soil structure, which in the Amazon and in Brazil in general, tropical soils, topsoils are very thin to begin with. So there are a lot of things about sugar production that are not environmentally friendly, they're not environmentally sustainable. And the question always comes back to me is that if it destroys habitat, if it permanently alters ecologies to the point of not being able to sustain animals anymore, or if it hurts human or non-human animals in its production, is it really vegan? And I'm not claiming to have the answers here. I'm just posing questions and I'm just providing information. So, and you could say like, oh, well, we'll just use sugar beets, sugar from sugar beets. Well, a lot of times they're mixed. It's not necessarily labeled that it's entirely from sugar beets. But if you can find that, great.
Received her Master of Science in Agroecology, and as if that wasn't enough, she went on to earn her Ph.D. in Biological Systems Engineering. She's currently the Senior Life Cycle Analyst at Virant here in Madison. She's here to talk about a methodology called Life Cycle Assessment, or LCA, and during a recent visit with Hannah West, our organizer, she talked about her ethical concerns of honey, agave, beef. Good morning and welcome to the Mad City Vegan Fest. Thank you for coming to our first talk. I'm Lynn Pauley, I'm co-director of Alliance for Animals, and I'm here to introduce our first speaker, Julie Sinistore, who's made quite an impression on our Vegan Fest organizers. Julie began her studies with a Bachelor of Science degree in Natural Resource Management. She continued to...
Okay. I am a staunch environmentalist. I do not hide this whatsoever. This is a picture of me when I was living in the Adirondack Mountains with no electricity, very little running water, no showers, no phones, no internet, and I was just like a total tree-hugging hippie. My nickname in college was Julia Butterfly. If that makes sense to you, awesome. If it doesn't, Google it. I seriously wanted to like go live in redwood trees so that people wouldn't cut them down and everything. And that is where my whole not wanting to eat meat or participate in animal
wheat and cane sugar, and Hannah said that she could never look at sweeteners the same again. So without any more ado, I'd like to welcome Julie Sinistore, and welcome.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts of food choices. Just a quick roadmap of where we're going. I'll give you a little bit more on my background of who the heck am I and why should you listen to anything that I say. And then I'm going to tell you some stuff that people in the audience who are vegan are going to be like, yay, my food choices are great for the environment. And then I'm going to tell you some stuff about the environmental impacts of food choices that you're going to be like, oh my God, no! If you care about the environment, which a lot of people in Madison do usually care about the environment. Then finally, I'm going to sum it all up with some reflection. I really hope we can have a little discussion, and after the talk, I'll be in the other area where the book table is, and you can come and accost me all you want and be like, but I thought agave was perfect. And I'm going to be like, look, I'm really sorry. So, who am I and why listen to me? Okay.